Hey again, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Wheel of Albums. I'm Justin, along with my brother Adam and our friend Jack. What we do here is we spin a wheel of the 1001 albums you must hear before you die, from Robert Dimery's book, 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die. Then we listen to that album for a week, and we get back to you. We tell you if we really think it's an album you must hear before you die. I spun the wheel this week. I got John Coltrane's 1965 spiritual jazz album, A Love Supreme. A Love Supreme. A Love Supreme.
So the wheel has given us John Coltrane's A Love Supreme this week. So we're diving into some jazz music.
And we had a discussion that it was probably our first jazz albums. And I'm semi-familiar again.
When I got into collecting acclaimed albums, I wanted some jazz, and first two that you need is Miles Davis, A Kind of Blue, and A Love Supreme by John Coltrane. So I am familiar with A Love Supreme.
I thought, why not give it a whirl? I think I've heard A Love Supreme one other time, so I was kind of excited to try it out and see what John Coltrane had to offer.
Wouldn't be able to say, oh, that's part two of A Love Supreme. If I heard it the day the wheel got spun, I would be able to now. I was looking forward to it, just to relax and hear some smooth jazz.
Boy, season 2 is all about very little lyrics, and if there are lyrics, it's more the musician talking. So you had like Sabu, Tubular Bells, and A Love Supreme. We get a little bit of Coltrane lyrics, even though, he plays the poem in part 4. So we definitely have a trend going for season 2.
Something I enjoy about Wheel of Albums is digging a little bit deeper into some albums that I'm already familiar with or own that maybe I hadn't done before. A Love Supreme would be a prime example of an album that I listened to and enjoyed before, but didn't really grasp what Coltrane was reaching for. A 4-piece spiritual journey chronicling Coltrane's devotion to God. The term spiritual jazz has been used for Love Supreme and also avant-garde jazz. Professor Adam, why don't you jump in here real quick and let everybody know a little bit more about avant-garde jazz.
Avant-garde jazz, also known as free jazz, is a style that kind of emerged in the mid-20th century, pushing jazz beyond traditional forms and structures. It's characterized by its emphasis on collective improvisation and unconventional harmonic approaches. And while sometimes it's used interchangeably with free jazz, avant-garde jazz often maintains a degree of structure or composition within its framework. And A Love Supreme totally fits into that definition. First avant-garde jazz album came out in 1959, known as The Shape of Jazz to Come by Ornette Coleman.
Oh, that's got to be on the wheel somewhere.
I would say I'm more familiar with what would be considered, I guess, pop jazz or light jazz, more of the Herb Alpert, Ramsey Lewis, Dave Brubeck, Herbie Hancock. So I had an ear for it. I didn't have a distinguished ear, I would say, or a discerning ear. I could hear stuff and know that it was jazz, or knew if it was mainly a saxophone player or jazz pianist, or a jazz saxophone player as the leader of the trio or the quartet or the quintet. I enjoy some jazz. It's very relaxing.
So the idea of explaining Coltrane's style as sheets of sound is perfect for trying to explain what Coltrane and his band is doing and throwing down. My most enjoyable track out of the 4 would be part 2, which is Resolution. I feel like, Coltrane's tenor sax really carries through, but then also all these cool little solos. There's a cool drum solo. There's all these little things that go on with it. That, again, framework of, the saxophone throughout is always probably my most enjoyable thing.
Coltrane's quartet here consists of McCoy Tyner on piano, Jimmy Garrison on double bass, and Elvin Jones on drums and percussion. And Adam using the word framework is perfect because they lay the perfect framework down. You take a song like Pursuance, which is the 3rd track on here and my favorite. Jones's drums for the first 2.5 minutes, it's just bonkers. I just love how that works. And I love how Coltrane brings in the sax, one of the sweetest tenor saxes you're ever going to hear. Everything complements each other, but yet is improvised. And that, I'm not a jazz aficionado. I'm not going to be able to sit down and tell you, how jazz is made. But from what I've heard of jazz and comparing this to some other jazz albums I've heard, there's something special about the way that these four intertwine and connect on A Love Supreme.
Don't really understand all the technical, hyper-technical terms and delineations as far as what would be a sheet of sound in this particular record. I am going to go with A Love Supreme Part 3. It reminds me of like a Pixie song, soft, growing into the loud mess. It starts with the drum out there all by itself, slowly building up momentum, and then it goes full speed. Everybody just jumps in full speed. And then you gotta take that break, and that's at that bass solo that kind of winds it down, which is similar to the bass solo that begins Part 2, Resolution. They're sitting there, smoking their smokes, and then they know it's time to go. Hit it. And they hit that gas, and they don't let up.
John Coltrane actually wrote a poem entitled A Love Supreme after he renewed his faith.
John Coltrane had his demons. He, again, on the liner note, didn't shy away from it. Put it out there. Got him kicked out of Miles Davis. Maybe you heard of him.
The poem that Coltrane wrote appears on Psalm via saxophone on the last track, which is quite a feat. I'm sure that would be the equivalent of me, like, not knowing lyrics to a song and just humming, and my daughter Sydney told me to please stop that.
Stop singing, you're not Sabrina Carpenter.
So the same amount of syllables in the poem is the same amount of syllables or notes that he played on that track. That is just awesome. And talk about like expanding the boundaries of music, doing something like that. You got to give props to John Coltrane for doing that.
This is basically a musical outline of his recovery, and maybe you at home could follow it as well. It does not feel preachy to me. It's very self-interpretive. I mean, he even withheld that those were lyrics. He just put it in like a poem. Maybe you could read this poem. Maybe there's some buried treasure somewhere if we look deeper into A Love Supreme.
Speaking of interpretations, a bad one, he only sings on it at the end of Acknowledgement, the part where he's saying A Love Supreme. But I remember the first time I heard it, I thought he was saying I love Supreme, as in I love Supreme Pizza. I love Supreme. I love Supreme. I love Supreme.
Not Ariana Grande either.
If I had a quartet and I was putting together a 4-piece suite of music, sell commercially to the world, my piece of music would be about making a sandwich.
Part 1.
Buying the supplies, going to the grocery store.
Part 2.
Would be all about putting the sandwich together.
Part 3.
Eating the sandwich.
The final act, Part 4.
Digestion.
All right, we ranked all the songs on A Love Supreme from 1 to 10. And then we divided that number by the amount of songs on A Love Supreme to come up with these numbers. Adam crunches these numbers for us. Jack got a 7. I gave it a 7.5, and Adam with a 4.25. Our songs in order, we liked Acknowledgement, Resolution, Pursuance, and Psalm in that order from top to bottom.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that I haven't looked, but I hope if I pull out the inner sleeve of a Boots Randolph Yakety sax that there is a liner note that just basically outlines and is secretly the lyrics to Yakety Sax, and it just flat out describes the narrative of when Benny Hill is running around slapping Jackie Wright on the head during the many romps that were played with Yakety Sax on the old Benny Hill show.
So do you need to hear A Love Supreme by John Coltrane before you die? It's kind of funny. I looked up Coltrane's most listened to songs on Spotify, and not one of these songs actually ranks in his top 10. That doesn't mean that this album isn't important. The fact is that, yeah, you should listen to this. It's an iconic piece of music that, if you're going to recommend jazz to somebody, Coltrane and Miles Davis are your boys, right? So this is his most acclaimed album. Need to listen to it. Need to expand your horizons. Or to put it another way, before you die, you must jump on the Coltrane. jump on the Coltrane.
This record, it's a short record, powerful record, and I enjoy that it can be background music, it could be total focus, it could bring revelation to people, it could just bring some finger snapping to people. I'm going to say yes, A Love Supreme is a record that you must hear before you die. They got it right in the book on this one. Please, I implore you, listen to A Love Supreme. My vote is yes, a record you must hear before you die.
This one's kind of a no-brainer for me, too. Did not grow up on much jazz at all. This is probably one of the first long players of jazz that I know that I got on my own as I got older. There's something about this album that's head and shoulders above a lot of jazz. And learning about the background, renewed faith in God, I thought that was interesting. Never knew that before. Made me even love this album more this week. So big thumbs up for me, and a big yes, you must listen to this before you die. We're running short on time. Adam, why don't you give a spin for next week's album?
So the wheel of albums has been spun, and it has given us Something Else by the Kinks as we head back to 1967 to see what the Kinks were up to. And they certainly were up to something else than all those other UK bands at the time.
Follow us on Spotify for a new album each Monday. Subscribe on YouTube for a new album every Monday as well. And now a word from our sponsor.
Hello, and we're here to remind you to start fresh with Bel Air. Just the right touch of menthol. And here comes an offer as fresh as Bel Air's flavor. You send in 4 Bel Air coupons to get your copy of John Coltrane's A Love Supreme. Just the right touch of menthol. The right menthol is light menthol to make your smoking fresh and free again. Like the fresh and free jazz record, A Love Supreme, when you send in only 4 Bel Air coupons.